Welcome to the new podcast, A Mick, a Mook, and a Mike, hosted by Billy O'Connor and Frank Pace.
It's October 3rd. I'm Frank Pace, the Mook. I am the Mook, right?
Yeah, you're the Mook.
You're Billy O'Connor, the Mick. So, Billy would be delinquent if we didn't address the elephant in the room. This was this morning's Los Angeles Times. I got a feeling that every newspaper in America has got this headline today. What do you think?
Well, of course, thoughts go out to the president and the first lady. Let's hope they get better soon. Trump tweeted last night that he felt good and that we'll get through this together. And I think he's definitely right. As long as we stick to the sacred document, it's 250 years old. It served us well. Believe in the Constitution and the glorious afterthought. And we will get through this. And I pray to God he's healthy and gets out of this.
Great. So let's move on. Because we're not a political show and we don't want to address politics, but we would be remiss if we didn't address that today. I really think he's going to be fine. He'll make it through. He'll be back on the campaign train real soon, so there's no reason to delve into that any more than we have. Yesterday was a sad day. It was the passing of perhaps the greatest right-handed pitcher of all time, Bob Gibson. What are your thoughts?
Well, I can tell you, as a gambler in them days, he was lights out, man. For money, as a money pitcher, Gibson was as good as it gets. I don't even know if I'd say he's the best right-hander. I'd say, for money pitcher, he was the man. I mean,
Who was better?
It's tough. I mean,
who was better?
Yeah, well, it's subjective. But for money, you put money on Gibson, it was money in the bank. That's the only thing I'm going to say. He was tough.
Great. I was thinking about a quote that Hank Aaron told a young Dusty Baker. He said, "You don't dig in on Bob Gibson. He'll knock you down. You don't stare at Bob Gibson. Don't smile at him. Don't talk to him. He doesn't like you. If you happen to hit a home run, don't run too slow. Don't run too fast. If you want to celebrate, go to the tunnel first. And if he hits you, don't charge the mound because he's a Gold Glove boxer."
Was he a Golden Gloves boxer?
Yeah, and he also played for the Harlem Globetrotters. He was a great athlete.
I didn't know that. He played for the Globetrotters too.
Yep.
But he was mean, man. On the mound, you dig it. He would put you on your seat. There's no doubt about it.
On your keister.
Without a doubt.
I'll tell you a quick story. It was 1967, and Rod was a rookie with the Twins.
We're talking about Rod Carew.
Rod Carew.
Of course.
He was a rookie for the Twins, and he came up in an exhibition game to face Bob Gibson, and he started to dig in at the plate. Tim McCarver looked up to me and said, "Please don't do that." And Rod said, "I've got to get my footing." So he kept digging in. And Gibson was glaring at him at the mound. So the first pitch came in, and Rod goes on his ass.
Please don't do that.
And he gets up and he starts digging in again. And Rod goes on his ass again. So he eventually Gibson got him out. But I talked to Gibson years later at the Children's Charity Classic in Kentucky, and he said, "That story's a damn lie." And I said, "What do you mean it's a damn lie?" He said, "Because if I wanted to hit him, I would have hit him."
Yeah, Gibson.
That's
Gibson was an assassin.
Yep.
He was an assassin.
That's Bob Gibson.
Yeah, well, rest in peace, pal.
Yep, for sure.
And thanks for the memories, is right.
So let's go
Speaking
on.
of memories, like I had a comic tell me the other day. He said, "I watched your podcast." He goes, "I really like it." He says, "It sort of reminds me of the Tonight Show, the senior tour." So thanks for the memories, I guess.
Yep, for sure. So let's go on to some happier news. The book is out.
Yay!
The book is out. It's available. It'll be available on Amazon.com. Probably look in your mailbox next Saturday or the following Monday. And if you ordered from AcclaimPress.com, you can probably get it a little sooner. It'll probably be in your mailbox by the end of the week. But also the audiobook is also out.
Hey.
The audiobook was read by Alex Hyde White. Of course, the introduction was read by Billy O'Connor because he wrote the introduction.
And I had to read it. Frank had to write the introduction. I wrote the introduction in crayon, so I had to read it in crayon.
And the audiobook is also out.
Wow.
The audiobook is out, and you can listen to a sample of it. Again, read by Alex Hyde White.
On Amazon.
On Amazon.com. So today we're very fortunate to have an acclaimed actor, director, producer, bon vivant, raconteur, choreographer, award-winning Broadway actor.
With one caveat, he's from Brooklyn, so we got to give him a caveat there. You know what I mean?
His name is Joel Zwick. Welcome, Joel. How are you?
I am fine. I'm really pleased to be here. Really pleased to be here.
We couldn't be more pleased to have you, man. When I was doing the research on you, I was blown away. Talk about prolific. Good God Almighty.
It only takes age. That's all. You just have to get old enough, and you find yourself having acquired an enormous amount of stuff that you've done. But it comes with age. It really does. You know, as Frank will tell you.
We got plenty of age at this table. That's for sure.
Yeah, and sadly enough, most of the guys our age are dead.
Yeah, I think no. Let's not today. Today easily we got another 10 years.
Yep.
Easily.
Yep. That's right. Before we join the silent majority, the real silent majority.
Yeah.
Very much silent majority indeed. Wow.
Go ahead,
Mick.
Billy. I know you got a lot of questions, Billy.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I was blown away. I mean, I got to tell you, I mean, so many shows you directed from my childhood, you know, and
No, don't do that.
I'm telling you, well, you had to be young when you were doing it.
You couldn't have grown up on me. It's just physically impossible that you could have grown up on me. But I do have generations of people legitimately, and it's one of the more daunting things I face is when I face somebody who grew up on me, who is now 50 years old. I'm going, you grew up on me?
I'm probably about 5 or 6 years younger than you. So, I mean, I didn't grow up on you exactly, but a lot of the shows you've done, especially, well, Laverne and Shirley, of course, comes to mind immediately, you know. And the fact that you're from Brooklyn and I'm from the Bronx, and I listened to a podcast that you did, and you were talking about the usual, I'd say, competition between people from the Bronx. And I'm going to ask you, do you think that comes back to the old days when the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Giants were all in New York?
I'm sure that that's exactly where it stems from. It stems from we were so bipartisan in terms of our beliefs and our thing that we were working on. And if you were in Brooklyn, you were a Brooklyn Dodger fan. And the Bronx tended to be more Yankee with a throw-in of some Giants in there that would show up, especially once Willie Mays came into the league. A lot of people started to pay attention to the Giants. But essentially, yeah, I believe so. And let me tell you, it's just as bad in the neighborhoods. Neighborhoods of Brooklyn were as apart as being Brooklyn to the Bronx. I mean, you never got out of your neighborhood growing up in Brooklyn because you weren't allowed out of your neighborhood. You know, on 2 blocks, one side were the Italians, 2 blocks on the other side were the Irish, and in the middle were the Jewish people. And the Irish and the Italians would get together every morning, and they would choose sides to see who would go to beat up the Jews that day. And the one thing the Jews had was we could run. We learned how to run. We didn't fight. We didn't care. We ran. And that saved an entire population of some very, very evolved people. So I'm very pleased about that. But no, you know, Gary Marshall, who gave me my first shot on Laverne and Shirley, he was Bronx. Penny Marshall was Bronx. So I had to stop picking on the Bronx. Plus, my grandfather was in the Bronx, and every Yom Kippur, I'd have to head up to my grandfather's house to I don't know what we were doing up there, but essentially, Rosh Hashanah maybe we did. I don't think we did Yom Kippur. But anyway, I got enough of the Bronx. I mean, to last me a lifetime.
You know, in the Bronx, you were talking about the separation of neighborhoods. We were the same way, but we divide things up by parishes because of the Catholic parishes.
Very much so, oh boy.
Yeah, like St. Philip Neri, St. Raymond's. You know, what parish you're from? St. Raymond's. I come from Our Lady of Mercy. And I grew up in the same parish as Penny Marshall. She grew up in my, and Rob Reiner. They all grew up in my parish.
That's right. That's right.
They all
Rob
grew up in the Bronx.
No, I can't knock Bronx. I mean, Brooklyn was Sheepshead Bay, Coney Island, Flatbush. What we had all these places, and you didn't go out of your neighborhood. I was Sheepshead Bay, and you stayed in Sheepshead Bay. You weren't messing around too much. I never got to see a show on Broadway until I was 16 years old. It was. No, it was, I forget, it was, I don't know, but it wasn't a very good show, but I got to see that. That was my first Broadway show at age 16. You weren't making it from Sheepshead Bay, which was very close to Coney Island, and you were not going to make it into Midtown Manhattan to see a show. It was an hour and a half on the train. And, yeah.
I think that's the same way with everybody in New York City. If you grew up in the Bronx, you know the Bronx and you know Manhattan. If you grew up in Brooklyn, you know Manhattan. When I was a fireman, they sent me to Brooklyn. It was a foreign country. I know Bangkok better than I know Brooklyn. I mean, honest to Christ, if it wasn't for my chauffeur, I was like, I don't know where I am out here.
Wait a second. What chauffeur?
Well,
what are we talking about here?
I was a lieutenant on the New York City Fire Department, and you had a chauffeur to drive the rig. And you depended on him when you were in Brooklyn. I didn't know where I was going.
Yeah, so let me interpret Billy for him. The chauffeur was the chauffeur was the guy who drove the fire truck.
As opposed to the Jew guy who blows the horn at the end of the holidays. Okay, I kind of assumed that, but wow, because I had a moment with that Staten Island. That was the one borough nobody knew anything about, because when I was growing up, there was no Verrazano Bridge. You had to take the Staten Island ferry, or you didn't get to Staten Island. But anyway, I had a friend from public school who became a fireman for his entire career in Staten Island. And he sent me a T-shirt with the whole fire thing, with his thing. And there was an event going on. I was directing an episode of some show, and they were talking to Suzanne Summers. And I was there wearing the shirt. Well, this started an uproar in the entire fire department in Staten Island. Nobody understood why this director in Hollywood had a T-shirt that explained, so basically I'm attached.
Well, Billy spent 20 years as a New York City, as a Bronx fireman, that he was a first responder at 9/11. So,
woo. But it's funny, you're talking about the Verrazano Bridge in Staten Island. In the Bronx, when we had to go to Staten Island to do any work, we used to cross the Guinea Gangplank, because there's so many.
Oh, that's right. You had to get through the Italian neighborhood. Very much so. Now we have to explain. Yeah. We were nicknamed at that time. We didn't think bad of it. The Jews were the Kikes. The Italians were the Guineas or the Wops, which meant without papers, because they tended to come to America without papers. And the Irish were the Micks, because they were McGravy, McThis's, McThatsis, McGovern's.
And we used to roast the potatoes, and they used to call them Mickeys.
That's right. That's right. But it was a very special time in that area of New York and Brooklyn. And it's truly remarkable that some really lower middle class kid out of Sheepshead Bay ever had a chance for a career in an industry he didn't know anything about. I mean, literally nothing about TV or film. There was no way to learn it for where I was. I mean, there was no classes in it. There was no school for it. There was no anything for it. So basically, you just kind of let time and connections take you where they took you, and then try to do the best you could do. But it still amazes me. I have no idea what that's all about.
You talk about making it in Hollywood. Your high school had some pretty swell people in it also. Let me finish my question before you jump in.
Okay.
You dated Carole King.
Yes, I did.
And you ran track with Bernie Sanders.
Well, I didn't run track with Bernie Sanders, but I knew Bernie Sanders running track. I also knew him because he was a major politico in a school that was very, very liberal and democratic. It was 89% Jewish at the time and was very democratic. But Bernie Sanders was beyond and above all of us. He was spouting stuff that most of us couldn't have cared less about. I didn't think Bernie was also on our basketball team, 12th man on the basketball team. But he was a long distance runner, and he was a year behind me because he didn't make the SP. The SP, Special Progress. We had it in New York back when they should have stopped it. And basically they took kids. If you had an IQ off of an IQ test that was either 130 or more, you were put into a special progress class where you skipped the 8th grade. You went 7th, 8th, and 9th in 2 years. Of course, it presented real problems, and that's why they stopped it. I was 13 and a half years old when I was a sophomore in high school, and there were 18, 19-year-old kids roaming the halls. Not a fun place to be. Luckily for me, I was so small and so insignificant that nobody ever picked on me. You would have been embarrassed to pick on me. I was that small.
Well, you haven't grown very much.
No, I haven't.
Then.
But I put on weight. I feel good about that. I know I'm no longer carrying 100 pounds sopping wet. I now have a legitimate size.
So
and you're pretty significant. You've become pretty significant.
Wow.
In your time.
You know, I still don't understand what it's about. I still think it was about the luck of connections and just a hard work ethic that came from being lower middle class in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. You just took what opportunities were afforded to you that somebody else who was smarter or quicker or faster than you offered you, and you did the best you could. I was one of the great followers. All my friends were the best. All my friends were the brightest in school, and all my friends were the better athletes. And I was none of those things. None of those things. But they liked me because I wasn't that competition to them. So if they moved up, I moved up, you know. And the whole track starts with Carole King, to be quite honest. Although she was Carol Klein in those days at Madison High School, this really talented young lady who had a drive that none of us had. We don't understand how she had it, but she wanted to be part of the music scene. And in 1954, I'd say, when rock and roll was starting to blow people out and Elvis Presley was making his stand, I remember in junior high school going into right outside the bus stop was a candy shop. And I went to the candy shop and I walked in and there were these bunch of girls staring at one of those jukeboxes because Elvis Presley was singing and they were enthralled. And of course, in my ego, I thought to myself, Jesus, here I am standing personally in the space and they're screaming about some guy on a jukebox. But Carol wanted to be part of the scene. So I think earlier on she'd been doing folk singing and she decided she wanted a rock and roll group. A doo-wop group of the 50s, just like the Tokens in Lincoln High School and any number of other high schools in the New York City area. We created the cosigns because we met in a math class. And Carol wrote our songs and did most of the lead singing. And we survived for 2 years before we had this wonderful audition with Ahmet Ertegun at Atlantic Records. What?
Very familiar with Ahmet Ertegun.
Yeah. So anyway, nice gentleman, and we auditioned for them, and we got a contract. Well, everybody, because we were 16, had to get their parents to sign the contract, and Carol's mother, who was decidedly smarter than all of us, wouldn't let Carol sign. She knew that the money, so to speak, in that group was going to be Carol, and she was right. She was right. By 1961, Carol had already signed a 10-year contract with ABC Paramount to write songs for the Shirelles, write songs for, you know it, the Little Eva and the Locomotion. And Carol was on her way, and she deserved it. My goodness God, was she a hardworking, intelligent young lady.
Did she know Neil Sedaka? Did you know Neil
yes,
Sedaka?
we did.
Yes. So why don't you tell a little bit about that story?
Okay. So basically, what was happening was Neil Sedaka was singing with the Tokens at that time before he broke away to do a single act at Lincoln High School. And we were the cosigns at Madison High School. And this idea came up that the two groups should go off together and do some USO tours in America. So we were rehearsing together for USO tours, and I think that's where Neil Sedaka got his crush on Carol and wrote the hit song "Oh Carol" for her. But Carol was not interested in Sedaka. Carol was, I think she thought I was really cute, and she was more interested in me. But nonetheless, we would sing. One day, we're at Neil's house, which was dead across the street from, for any of you people who might know, Brighton Beach Baths, which was a major center in near Coney Island. And so we're waiting for Neil to come back from something or other. We didn't know what. And he comes charging into the rehearsal that he's just heard the most amazing voice he's ever heard. He had just been to a talent show at Erasmus Hall High School and heard Barbra Streisand. That was mind-blowing. I mean, because he wasn't far from right. I mean, that was one of the more remarkable voices of a generation for sure. But yeah, so Sedaka, matter of fact, I got to meet Sedaka many years later when I was directing a thing for Charlie Fox. Yeah, it's Charlie Fox, who's a composer. He had a show called The Songs of Our Times, and Sedaka came on to do some of his classic hits from the heyday.
Wow. So what was your break in Hollywood? Not in Hollywood. What was your first time you made it? Were you on Broadway? What was
basically the key to most of my success, if you can read my shirt, La Mama Earth.
Right.
I'm trying to figure out how to pull it up. Everything is reversed here. Okay, but anyway, La Mama Earth. I started out, luckily enough, what I said connections. Carole King took me to this guy, Roy Levine, at Madison High School. Roy Levine, who's no longer with us, may have been the only genius we knew in high school. This kid could write, he could direct, he could light, he wrote plays, he did everything. Well, he was running an organization at that time that Carole was involved with, so she introduced me to Roy. Roy later on directs an off-Broadway show called McBird. Anybody who doesn't know McBird, look it up. All I can tell you is that my phone was tapped for 9 months because I was in that show. Because it essentially took the play Macbeth and cast Lyndon Johnson as the lead. Wow. And it was saying in no uncertain terms that Lyndon Johnson was responsible and part of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Hello.
And this was right after the Warren Commission, of course.
Yes, it was. As a matter of fact, we got, who was that head of the Warren?
Earl Warren.
Yeah, I know Earl. I'm thinking somebody else, but the fact. but
who's the head of the Warren Commission? Earl Warren. Who's buried in Grant's tomb?
Yeah. Grant. Okay. Okay. So it's a standard. Good. But essentially, I have no way. But so we did McBird, and McBird took me to a wonderful actor who was in McBird with me at the time. Called Andy Robinson, who wound up playing in Dirty Harry, the maniacal, crazed Aquarius killer. But anyway, he had just gotten an opportunity to go to La Mama to work in an actor training group called the La Mama Plexus. So he called me up to ask me if I would join with my wife at that time, Diane, who is now deceased, but essentially we started doing this La Mama work, which was a physical style of training actors like they were athletes. Meaning try to find them to a place where they could get there in the present. They're not thinking about their lines. They're not thinking about their attitudes. They're not thinking about anything except being in the moment. And that kind of thing changed my life because La Mama took me to Greg Antonacci. Greg Antonacci writes a show called Dance With Me. Dance With Me gets onto Broadway. I get a Tony nomination as a choreographer, and all of a sudden, I'm a director. I was also nominated as a director from other organizations, but the Tony people were not willing to give a director of some La Mama project a nomination as Tony, so they gave it to me as a choreographer. But my choreographer skills are basically, I can tell actors where to go. I can't choreograph dancers. I don't have that particular thing. Frank can tell you a little bit about that. There was things I could get through doing it myself, but every once in a while we had to bring in a choreographer to do some real choreography on shows we did. And basically, it was that lead-in to I started doing summer stock once I got a reputation as this director off of the Broadway show. And I directed John Raitt in Shenandoah, Howard Keel in Shenandoah, Christine Andreas in Oklahoma, and had a wonderful time doing these summer stock shows, which were star-driven vehicles that played all over the country. So I did those directing things. And then Greg Antonacci, yes, the same Greg Antonacci who did Dance With Me, who wrote that, gets a chance to go to Hollywood. Why? Because he has two friends at Queens College, which he went to, where I was teaching, Lowell Gans and Mark Rothman. Lowell Gans and Mark Rothman had, through their own connections, gotten a chance to write for The Odd Couple. So they became followers of Gary Marshall. So after The Odd Couple, they got a chance to create and be part of Laverne and Shirley, which they brought Greg out to play a strange little Italian guy, that's all he could do, named Hector on Laverne and Shirley. He must have had maybe 10 episodes. But then they started a new show starring Adam Arkin in 1978 called Busting Loose. And Greg was now made a regular and a member of the writing staff. So basically, I went out to Hollywood because I was doing some work in Las Vegas at the time to see Greg. And Greg got it in his brain that I should direct a sitcom. And of course, I was a theater man at that particular point, and theater men don't do sitcoms. They don't do TV. We do theater. But essentially, I got myself completely stoned that night and realized that, listen, Mr. Hotshot, you have no idea whether you can do this job or not. 2, you have no idea whether you would like this job. And 3, you have no idea whether they would hire you for this job. So I said, you got to get out there and give it a shot. So the story continues on, where I went then my entire life. You have no questions. I warned you you'd have very few questions. I just yada. So anyway, here I was. So they were trying to get me. So Greg was setting up everything. So he went to Mark Rothman and Lowell Gens, who knew me from Queens College, and said, listen, I think Joel should direct an episode. And they said, well, you know, it's a new show. The network, the studio, they're not going to let him direct. And Greg said, fine, but if they say it's okay, would it be okay with you? So they reluctantly, figuring it would never happen, said, fine. It'll be okay with us. So I had this meeting with Judy Copage, a wonderful lady who was running current TV for Paramount at the time, in order to meet to her about directing a sitcom. And it was the shortest meeting on history, in that I walked in, I said, listen, I've never directed a sitcom before, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you I can direct a sitcom. But I've been watching now for a few weeks, and in my estimation, a retarded monkey can direct sitcoms. At which point she looked at me, she said, excuse me, went to the phone, picked up a call to a guy named Barr in CBS and said, I've got this guy, I want him to direct an episode of Busting Loose. And sure enough, then Mark and Lowell had no choice but to say, fine. And they gave me an episode that Greg himself had written, and that essentially starred Greg and Annie Potts. They were living together at that time. I know that because I was living on their couch. But essentially, it was a wonderful episode. It did not fall into a legitimate spin-off, which is what I think they were hoping for. But it was from that point on, Paramount started to give me work, screen tests, stuff like that. Go.
So let me ask you, Joel, how did you learn to direct cameras? Because let me tell the folks that are watching this, Joel is the master of cameras. He knows, he comes in and does his work at 6:30 in the morning. He knows what shots are what. He knows where every camera is going to be. He knows every shot because he basically directs for the camera. He's a brilliant performance director, but if you can't see the shots, what's the point? So, Joel, how did you learn to direct cameras?
Well, I sat there with a wonderful camera coordinator. In those days, it was 3-camera film. His name was Phil Perez. And he was working at that time on Laverne and Shirley, I believe, and Busting Loose. He was very heavily involved in the Gary Marshall organization. And I sat with him in the stands, and he would kind of say, well, you see that? That's not going to cut together. That's not a good shot. This is not a good shot. And then I followed it up by working with the editor staff. And I sat in their room in their 3-headed moviola as they told me, oh, this is where the cut happens. That's where the cut happens. This is what this is all about. This now has switched angle on me. And I learned a little bit, but I was a pretty decent technologically minded guy. I had stage managed theater for a while, where you have to call 300 cues in a major musical and get it all happening at the same time. So I was somewhat evolved in terms of being able to understand visualization. And I could visualize what these things were about. And I kind of learned pretty quickly that the key to staging a sitcom was where you placed the furniture, because then you could send the actors to the furniture and know that they would be shot well in those positions. Mm-hmm. You know, but most of the sets were created that way anyway. Every once in a while they do something strange and you say, no, the couch can't be facing a wall. I got to get a cat. So you'd move things around until you could get a flow, you know, and that was pretty much it. But one of the things that whole La Mama stuff gave me was the in the moment reality. Now, Frank, I'll tell you, I never worked with a script. I was the only director who never worked from a script. I believe that the script supervisor could tell actors when they did bad lines, and certainly when the producers saw a run through, they could easily see when bad lines were being done. But I just cared if the moment was happening, if the actors. So I was there with the actors. I'm a great laugher. I have my laugh still on laugh tracks from Paramount days. Me, Desi Arnaz, and Jim Brooks. You could find our laughs on virtually any soundtrack when they started to implement soundtracks to help, cuts and stuff that they needed to do that they thought the audience didn't find funny enough or whatever. But essentially, that's exactly what happened. So I was pretty adept at that and always stayed in the moment. So I learned to virtually memorize a script, certainly beat by beat, if not line by line. And I learned to memorize camera blocking.
Right.
And that was Phil Perez, because I remember the first Busting Loose I did, and everybody was very happy with the run-throughs. And Phil was very happy. He knew that it could be shot. And I memorized my cameras. A, you're going to shoot this. B, you're going to shoot this. C, you're going to shoot this. Well, I made it through 2 of 5 scenes when my mind turned into jelly. And I begged Phil to just finish it for me, and he did. But essentially, from that point on, I just got better and better because I kept thinking that was a valuable thing to have, the ability to see.
You mentioned Desi Arnaz. I wrote in the book, Billy, my book, Desi Arnaz placed the couch where the couch goes. He put the doors and the entrances downstage.
That's right.
And occasionally a director will come in and say, well, a first-time director or a new director will come in and say, well, I want the couch to be facing the door and I want the door to be upstage. It takes 2 or 3 days until a camera crew comes in and says, what are you doing, pal? And but they changed it back, and the couch goes back where the couch is, and the entrances are upstage.
Another thing about lips that I find connects with Joel is that
I'm losing you guys. Are you guys?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now, Joel? Can you get me?
I can hear you, but maybe this is go for it. Go for it, Billy.
Okay. Well, what I'm saying is another coincidence, or not coincidence, but another similarity. And if these lips could talk with you, it seems to me in show business, Frank makes a point of saying it's a lot about luck. It's a lot about connections. Never give up on anybody that you already know, and be flexible. And you have amazing energy. I mean, I think you come from the Einstein school, 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration. I mean, you're flexible, but your energy is like, it's borders on manic. I border on manic, and you blah, 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 blah. So I imagine that had a lot to do with your success.
Yeah, I think probably, Frank would say that my energy was definitely a key to my success. Even when I first got on Laverne and Shirley, when Gary Marshall looked at me and said, I want you to direct the girls next season, and I had no idea what he was talking about at all. It was at that point that I found out it was Laverne and Shirley, the #1 show in America at that time, as it turned out. So it's all quite something. But it was my energy, my New York energy, that enamored, especially Penny Marshall, to me as a director. Because I was fast on my feet, I was energetic, and I did not waste time. And the other thing was, I kind of understood actors. I understood actors primarily because the year I spent in McBird as an actor, I became painfully aware that I was not going to make it as an actor. I was not good enough, to be quite honest. I had in that company at that time Stacy Keach, Rue McClanahan, Cleavon Little,
Wow.
Bill Devane. I mean, these were kids coming out of college, 2-3 years out of college in their mid-20s. And they were such enormously phenomenal actors that I knew that was not something I could do. But I did understand what it was they wanted, what it was they needed from directors, what it was they were willing to accept from directors. And I think that knowledge of how to talk to actors, realizing that, Frank will tell you, I would do a scene once, twice, and that was it. They then had to do it for the run through. There was no continuous work on these scenes. My belief was that comedy better happen pretty fast or it was going to die on the vine. And so that's what I did. I under-rehearsed everything and put the onus on the actors to do what they do best, which is to find the moments on their feet, to be in the moment, to find funny things. And it didn't make a difference to me whether they did the staging exactly right or not. That would be created and fixed when cameras came around. Because remember, our system was 3 days of rehearsal, and then you're into camera blocking and maybe some pre-shooting, which we used to call it if we had some really massive scene that had to be taken care of. But essentially, that was it. So yes, my energy and my speed made the big difference. I'm sure of it. And the fact that just worked hard. That's all.
Well, when you talk about speed, when you put Joel's energy with my energy,
Aye.
and we had an assistant director by the name of Rosario Rivetto. Can you put? Yeah.
That's working on what project, Frank?
Well, this is going to be Shake It Up.
That's right.
Right here, Rosario wrote Joel's book.
With him, that's right. Just like the two of you were together, I spent hours upon hours with Rosario asking me specific questions that he thought I should answer. And then Rosario would pull the whole thing together and shape the book. So enormous amount of this is Rosario, but some of the blabbering is me.
Yeah, so let me the point I was going to make is we had such great energy together. In year 3 of Shake It Up, or year 2 of Shake It, the end of year 2 of Shake It Up, Rob Lauderstein, who was our executive producer, said we're going to shoot a movie. And we're going to shoot a movie. Shake It Up was a great show. It was a dance show. It featured Zendaya and Bella Thorne and a pretty good cast of really young actors. Zendaya, of course, has become a superstar, and she can attribute a great part of her success to Joel Zwick. But we had to shoot this 90-minute movie, and we had 8 days. Normally, when you shoot a 90-minute movie, you have maybe 30 days. We had 8 days, and we had to shoot, what did you say, 3 or 4 dance numbers?
At least on 5 different locations. They were all located essentially on the lot. But the fact remains we were moving from studio to lobby.
Wait a second. I hate to interject, but the name of the movie was Shake It Up Goes to Japan.
Yeah, Japan, no less.
So we shot a movie in Japan on the lot, LA studio lot, in 8 days.
Wow.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that was a coup for all of us. Everybody who was involved with that particular shoot. It was insane, because Frank and I were working at warp speed, running around from set to set to try to get things taken care of. I do a scene someplace there, then I get the light back on me. What a good-looking guy. But anyway, okay, I think I got it. But anyway, so I see what's going on. What's this?
Yeah,
no.
That's good.
Didn't
Okay.
Zendaya,
A little bit.
didn't Zendaya
Can
just
you
win
bring
an
that screen down
Emmy
just a
for
little bit?
Yes, she did.
youngest
Yeah,
There you go.
actress?
youngest actress ever.
That's
Yes.
fantastic.
Yes,
Perfect.
great.
Yes, that's true. But we knew that Zendaya was an outstanding talent. That took no brains to figure out. It really didn't. But the fact that she was such a well-managed, such a bright, such a considerate, such a thoughtful young lady, she was so far beyond anything you could imagine at that age. She was a black girl and had to suffer from Oakland, no less. She understood what that was all about. She understood an enormous amount. And I think that depth of understanding is what made her such a remarkably good actress, because, she was always ahead of us on Shake It Up. And when we went to Casey Undercover, she stayed ahead of us, because
she was a mixed race girl.
Mixed race.
Her mom, Claire, is white, and her dad is a black man.
That's right. Kazembe was 6'2", but Claire was 6'4".
Yeah.
We were very concerned that as she was growing at an enormous pace, that this girl was going to be so tall as to ruin her whole career. But as it was, she lucked out, ended up at about 5'10.5", 5'11", and became perfect height so she could contain a modeling career. She was such a good actress. She could sing, she could dance. She was quite something. She was quite something.
And for me, it was very gratifying to work with a young talent like Zendaya and Bella Thorne, at, truthfully, at the latter part of my career. So that was very gratifying to me, because, you work with Stallone, you work with Sinatra, you work with Rickles. If we're not saying we're at the latter part of our career, we're being liars.
No, we are considerably at the last. I think earlier said that basically we find a place in our lives where we may be working more than ever, but we're no longer having to work for money.
Yeah.
Not that money would be the worst thing in the world to have happen, but the fact still remains we paid enough dues so that we will get through this particular pandemic period and this period of being aged out of a business that basically is trying to turn younger and more multi-ethnic and more, and for a while I got out because I started to realize I'm taking work away from blacks. I'm taking work away from young women. I don't need to be doing this. And I started to nurture Frank was very good at this too, nurturing young talent who eventually became quite accomplished as directors or quite accomplished as writers. And that was one of the things that we did. But Frank and I were just on the same page together. It was remarkable. I think all in all, I don't know how many we did find together, but the fact is I think we had one argument in all those years. Frank wanted something done as a 2-set thing, and I thought I could do it as a 1-set thing. I remember it was something like that. It was on Shake It Up, because I think that somebody was getting married. It was a marriage, and I saw it in 1 shot, and you saw it in 2 shots, and that was the only battle we had in all those years. But Frank also did something really good for me in that when Michael Jacobs was doing Girl Meets World, and Frank thought I should have a meeting with Michael Jacobs, and everybody thought that's just crazy. There is no way Michael Jacobs and Joel Zwick are going to work together. It's just not going to happen. But Frank kind of believed it. He had me have this meeting with Michael Jacobs. And it turned out that Michael and I had similar backgrounds. He, by the age of 20, had a play on Broadway. He had a major movie in a quiz show by the time he was 24. So we had some things in common, and we decided that we'd give it a shot. And it worked out very well for both of us in terms of, but Michael was Michael. He was not the easiest round, but I do believe he was brilliant. I believe that very firmly about him. But the fact is, he was not easy necessarily to work with. And he put together 2 people who basically didn't take much shit from him. If it was necessary for us to override something Michael was saying, we both were capable of doing it.
Yeah, there was definitely truth in numbers.
Yes, we gained some power in the fact that it was both of us.
We ganged up on him a little bit. And one good thing that came out that is one of the terrific young directors working today is Danielle Fishel, who played Topanga in that show. She learned from you the art of how to direct for cameras, and she learned from doing Girl Meets World the art of she knows where the jokes are, and it's very rare. Yeah. And it's very rare when you get somebody who knows how to direct cameras and knows where the jokes are. But let me segue. Now, how did you get My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which is the number one grossing film of all time, independent film of all time?
Okay, well, that tracks itself out to Bosom Buddies, where they were doing talent searches all over America. Laura Selznick, I think the granddaughter of Selznick, was sent by ABC to see if she could locate talent all over America. So she went to New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and in New York, she found this young actor, 21 years old, Tom Hanks, who was working as an understudy in an off-Broadway show in a cold water apartment. Well, we cast him. We brought him out to do Bosom Buddies, and essentially that was almost a debacle, because the first day of rehearsal they had cast somebody opposite Tom to play his buddy, and basically I thought this guy couldn't act. So I called the producers and said, I've got to give you a run through today at 2:00. And they said, today? It's your first day of rehearsal. I said, you guys have to see this. And sure enough, they saw it, and this guy was immediately fired. And it looked like they were going to pull the plug on Bosom Buddies, because Tom Werner at the time, who was at ABC, before Tom Werner joined with Marcy Carsey, and essentially he thought, nah, let's just drop the whole thing, whatever. And I said, wait a second, I have an actor who I think could work with Tom Hanks. I just directed him in a thing called it was On the Home Front, whatever Annie Potts was in. It was a wonderful show, and Scolari was excellent in it. So I said, I think
Peter Scolari.
Peter. And I think that Peter Scolari could work with Tom. And so they said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, listen, let me do something.
Joe, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the premise of the show was? For
Bosom Buddies. Oh,
yes.
God. Bosom Buddies was these 2 guys who were buddies, who basically one fell madly in love with a beautiful blonde played by Donna Dixon. And in order to get themselves into a place to live, they decided to dress up as women. It was kind of like off of Some Like It Hot, to dress like women so they could move into an all-women's establishment so that Tom could be close to Sonny. But at any rate, Tom and I became friends because we were the only ones of that company who were married with children. So we would get together on the weekends, and we would together. His family would come up to swim in my pool because Tom couldn't afford a pool. And I would go down to his house in the valley where we would have a barbecue on the weekends. And the most amazing thing was out in his backyard, the first thing Tom purchased was a telescope. And it wasn't because he was peering into windows. He was looking up at the stars. Even in that time at 21, he had this fascination with the skies that was truly remarkable. But anyway, so years later, we get one of the casting we did for Bosom Buddies, a young lady who played a witch, to be quite honest, Rita Wilson. Really talented, funny actress, very pretty. And both Tom and I noticed her because we were very heterosexual men, and we'd play a game. And essentially, that was Rita. 3 years later, Tom gives me a call and says, "Do you remember that girl that we had on Bosom Buddies that we both thought was so boom?" And I go, "Rita Wilson." Well, he gets in touch with Rita Wilson. He brings her down to play a role in a movie he's doing with John Candy. He had by that point been divorced from his wife, and he and Rita started a relationship. So now I've got Rita and Tom. So Tom, one day, I'm getting out of TV because of the things I said before. Time for other people to do the work. And I sent Tom a script for an independent movie that I thought was viable, because I thought maybe a comedy director could have some kind of cachet in independent film. And Tom read the whole thing, gave me some notes, and finally asked me what I was doing with this thing. And I said, getting out of TV, going to try independent directing. He said, "Well, I've got a script I want you to direct," and sent me My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Well, that was pretty insane. And I would have directed the phone book if Tom had asked at that particular point. And essentially, I took it on, and between Tom was the control. It was being budgeted such a little amount of money that both HBO and Gold Circle basically were told they would be having no input on script and no input on acting. Tom was going to be in control of it, and they all did it because HBO owed Tom huge debts over all the work he'd been doing in the miniseries. So they bought that, and we were lucky in that we didn't have to stunt cast. We didn't have to do anything with Greek Wedding. We took what we thought were the best people and we put them into the roles. It was difficult finding her father, but one day Michael Constantine walked in for a reading, and he didn't say 3 words when he was cast, because sometimes casting can happen that fast. And we had another lucky break with John Corbett, who we didn't have available. We had nobody to play that role. We were 3 days away from principal photography. So basically we were going to give it up when all of a sudden we're at a bar somewhere in Toronto, and we hear laughter at this table. This guy is talking about he just read the funniest script he's ever read, and he's sorry he can't do it because he was working at that time with on a movie that was being done in Toronto called Serendipity. And go figure that serendipity because it was serendipitous. So we went over to the table. We told him we were My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and we're going to call his people and see if we can work something out. So we called his people, and we made an arrangement. What days do you need him for filming? We will work around your schedule. I think he had about 5 more days for filming, but we had to keep his long hair. And it turned out that the long hair, I think, was a boon for us because he didn't look like your average really good-looking stud. He looked like some kind of stranged-out hippie. So that the understanding of why he would get struck by Nia Vardalos at that particular point became more coherent. And there we were. Yeah.
Now, Joe, Nia Vardalos did a one-woman show. Is that correct? She
Oh,
was
yeah.
doing Big Fat Greek. And it's no accident that Rita Wilson is part Greek.
It's all together. The story goes, at least the lore of the story goes, I don't know if it's the truth, that Rita and Tom were in New York. And they'd gotten to see a number of shows. And Rita came back to California driven that she and Tom were going to start to catch up with the theater scene in LA. So she opens up the paper to look for possible things to see. And there, in the only ad that Nia Vardalos ever placed, was this 1-inch little thing that said, "My Big Fat Greek Wedding," with the theater and its performance times. Well, Rita saw this ad, and she had to run to see this show. Tom wouldn't go originally, but after Rita saw it the first time, she dragged Tom back, and they fell in love with the whole idea, and they went about the process of getting the rights and establishing the idea that they were going to shoot this movie themselves. And that's when Tom called me up and said, "We're doing it." And the whole deal was that Nia would star and Nia would write and I would direct. And if anything went wrong with that, he was going to pull the plug on the project. So that's what happened. And it was a remarkably interesting, what was it? We did it in 21 days? I don't know what we did. It was,
Wow.
you know.
Now tell me, a cup of coffee. You know, I've often said, and matter of fact, it's in If Lips Could Talk, that coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. A cup of coffee that you had with somebody who wanted Tom Hanks to be on Happy Days.
Oh, my goodness gracious. This was Bobby Hoffman, who was the casting director for all of the Gary Marshall projects at that time. And he was casting director for Bosom Buddies. He was casting director for Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days, Mork and Mindy. You go down the list. Well, we would meet for breakfast every once in a while because Bobby and I were the only two people who showed up stupidly early in the morning. And at one point he was commiserating. He said, I'm feeling so bad. We just offered Tom Hanks a chance to play a major guest star in Happy Days where he was going to be able to go against the Fonz. And he turned us down. And I said, Tom turned you down? He said, yeah, he turned us down. So I said, wait, let me give Tom a call and see what that's all about. Well, Tom didn't know anything about the offer. By that particular point, whoever his agent was, who he then got rid of immediately, had never told him because they wanted him to go into features. They didn't want him back in TV. But I said, Tom, do you know that's going on? He said, no. And sure enough, he took the role in Happy Days. Who was the producer of Happy Days? Lowell Gans. And at that time, Babalu Mandel. Who was the one of the stars of Happy Days? Ron Howard. What movie they doing? Splash. What did they decide to do? Put Tom into Splash. And all of a sudden, explodes a career for him. Once again, it's the connections that and paying attention to the people you care about. And bingo, Tom came back and it certainly repaid me for my inclusion in his early part of his career. But essentially, that's how it happened. That's how it happened.
That's how it happens a lot.
Yeah, it happens a lot that way. Yeah,
a lot to people who really are successful. And I have often said anybody who is successful in his business and doesn't attribute a good portion of their success to luck is a liar.
No, quietly, it's truly remarkable. And when I really started TV also, it was also becoming apparent to producers in the TV realm that perhaps these little half-hour sitcoms could easily be directed by somebody who directs theater. Right. As opposed to a film director, somebody who understands how to stage actors and create a scene. So my timing was impeccable. There were a few of us that succeeded quite well at that time, and some succeeded, but in other areas. Jeff Bleckner, one of the best directors I knew, he couldn't handle sitcom. The speed was just too great for him. Get him into miniseries, get him to the 2-hour format, and Bleckner was a multiple Emmy winner. So I was one of the lucky people that scored because they thought directing theater and directing sitcom couldn't be too far apart. And they were right. It wasn't.
And you did a lot of work with Bickley, Boyett, and Miller, correct?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. They gave me Bickley, Warren. Now, Bickley, oh, God, it was Miller, Boyett, Bickley, and Warren. Basically, They produced for me 17 years straight of work.
And what are some of the shows you did for them?
Okay, started out on Laverne and Shirley, went to Mork and Mindy, went to Bosom Buddies, went to Perfect Strangers, went to Full House, Family Matters, Step by Step. And by that point, I had completed 17 seasons. There were a few breaks in there. I had 3 years on Webster. I had a few other shows here and there. But essentially, that was it. I was very lucky. I got implanted in that organization. But once Bob Boyett and Tom Miller decided they'd done enough. They wanted to go back to theater or something. They were leaving the business. I was now 20 odd years into the business with a huge salary and a huge reputation, but a lot of people were afraid to work with me. They didn't quite know what it was I did or didn't do, and they were very scared by my salary and very scared by my prestige. But it turned out, little by little, I found out that it made no difference to me. I directed anything. Although after a while, directing 2-3 episodes of this show, running to 2 to 3 episodes of that show, basically you were auditioning. And as a director, that's the last thing you want to be doing, is auditioning for a chance to direct another episode. Because remember when yeah.
Well, I was going to say, when you were with Bickley Warren, where were you producing those shows, at Paramount or at Warner Brothers?
By that particular point, it was Warner Brothers.
Right.
Most of those things were done at Warner Brothers. Certainly, the key shows there. And it was a wonderful lot at that time. There were great things happening because it was a very exciting lot. Just like Paramount. I was at Paramount for the first 7 years of my career before I moved over to Warner Brothers, which then produced an enormous number of years of work.
So I've found out that in my career, I spent, probably 15 years in a row at Warner Brothers as pretty much the go-to guy in comedy.
Mm-hmm.
But when I stopped doing Head of the Class, when I had done Head of the Class, I also did Murphy Brown, and those were 2 Warner Brothers shows. I was off for a year because nobody, as much work as I had done at Warner Brothers didn't have a show for me at the time, and I found that the other networks didn't know who I was. I mean, they knew me, but they didn't know my work. They didn't know my personality, and they had their own people that they would go to that they were that they were more secure with. And security has a big factor in luck also.
Well, certainly, but to be kind of, as a producer, security is critical. If they don't think there's a producer who can produce their show, they got some real problems. But the fact is, it was the same thing for me. I had this reputation, but so basically, Davey Duclon went someplace. I did some shows for him. There's a little bit of residual producers who had done work for Miller Boyett through the years that kept me going for a while there until I decided to get out. And that was My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And that was a 10-year period of time in film before I realized that I didn't want to play Hollywood's game in film. They were sending me scripts. They thought after My Big Fat Greek Wedding, I don't know what they thought, but I think they thought I could direct women. And so therefore, I was being sent every female-centric script that Hollywood thought would be a good idea to do, and I kept turning them down. I didn't like the scripts. And little by little, if you turn down Hollywood enough, that's it. It's over. Hollywood has shut you out. And I'm not sure what I was – that's why I went into I was stuck around. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was really too old to worry about it. But then my daughter, my lovely daughter Hillary, who has now become a current executive at the Disney Channel in terms of she was in charge of certain shows.
She's a mocker. She's a mocker.
She's a mocker. And basically, I took her out to lunch one day, and then her boss noticed and said, "Hillary, is Joel Zwick your father?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "Do you think you can get your father to direct some episodes of shows we're doing at Disney?" So I said to Hillary, "Hillary, will it help your career?" And she said, "I think it might." I said, "Good, then you will tell them that I will direct anything that you tell me to direct." And basically, that's what started the whole flow. And I was doing not Love Boat, my goodness gracious. It was On Deck, the twin boys. God.
Richie Rich?
No, I did Richie Rich. That was another phenomenal experience. But no, this was
whatever.
Yeah, whatever. I did some shows and spent
Sweet
7
life.
years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me interject.
Oh, yes.
I want to ask you a question. Now, you said modestly before you weren't much of an actor, but obviously you had an eye for talent. I mean, between Peter Scolari and Tom Hanks, did you see Hanks pop to you? Did that seem like anybody come along like, say, well, Robin Williams, did he pop? I mean,
yeah, Robin Williams.
You knew.
Yeah, you knew with Robin Williams that he was such a strangely independent talent that somewhere along the way he might strike gold. You just kind of knew that because nobody else was doing what he could do. Now, with Tom Hanks, it was interesting. At 21, what I always used to say about Tom is he had a sense of self that I don't understand how he had at age 21. He didn't really have that much background and training. I think he did 3 summers of Shakespeare in Cleveland. I don't even begin to tell you what Shakespeare in Cleveland has to be about. But anyway, he did that, and but basically he had no experience. There was no track record. There was nothing. There was no reason this guy should be as secure in who he was as it turned out. But he was that secure, so I never thought about whether it was going to move on or not, because at that time it really wasn't much of a concern to me. If he could keep bosom buddies alive for a number of years, that would be cool. But obviously, his career took different paths.
And you worked, the creator of Bosom Buddies was our good friend Chris
Thompson.
And Chris Thompson also then later in life created. The last show he ever created was Shake It Up. So you talk about connections. We span from Joel and Bosom Buddies in, 1980, 1978, wherever that was.
Yeah, 1980, I think.
To Shake It Up, which was 2011 through 2014. all connected to dots.
All not severing connections and being lucky, like you said.
Yeah.
And another thing you guys both agree on, and if these lips could talk, Frank writes a whole chapter trying to dissuade people from becoming actors. And you believe the same thing. Don't get into this business, no matter what. It's funny. I was a fireman, like I said. And in 55 engine, Steve Buscemi was a fireman in 55 engine for 5 years before he decided to become an actor. And when he told his captain, I didn't know Buscemi, but I knew his captain, that he wanted to become an actor, the captain said, Steve, you got a pension, you got health care. And let's face it, you ain't that good looking, No.
Well said.
The same things dissuade actors from trying to take this. Frank has a whole chapter about it.
Yeah, no, as a matter of fact, success is maybe a more bitter pill than failure. Because if you are successful, people want you to replicate what it is you did that made you so successful. Very rarely do they let you take on something that you think might be exciting, or you might think be different. They don't want different from you. They want what it is you do. So therefore, where you may make money and you may be, quote, a success, whatever it was that was the passion that you had for either acting or for directing or for this could easily be dissolved into nothingness by the ability of the industry to simply say the only thing we're hiring you for is. And that's kind of what happens to actors, especially. They just want to churn out the same stuff. The same stuff.
I always tell people, if you're an actor and you're a moderately successful actor, try to learn what's going on behind the cameras, because your career for an actor can only last so long. But if you can learn to be a director like Ron Howard did, if you can learn to be a studio executive like Brian Robbins did, if you can learn to write like Dan Schneider did, you can have a career for the rest of your life. And all 3 of those guys have had marvelous careers. Ron Howard, was in Head of the Class. I mean, not Head of the Class. He was in
Happy Days.
Happy Days.
Opie.
Opie and Mayberry.
Yeah.
And Brian Robbins and Dan Schneider were in Head of the Class. Their success, they're infinitely successful. That's what the successful people in this business do, because less than 1/2% make a living as actors.
Yeah, that's a good percentage. I would take that shot. No, I don't think I would. But essentially, I was lucky. But it's a fascinating business. It truly is. I'm very appreciative of the fact that I got to spend as many years as I did working. That was a remarkable thing. My goodness gracious. I worked well past my retirement
expiration date.
I should have, very much so. Very much so.
You went on to write a book, directing the sitcom, and
there you go.
That's practically, from what I understand, the fundamental book about directing. I mean, directing for dummies, you could almost have called it.
It was written by dummies, so I couldn't quite call it that. I had to come up with a slightly better name. Actually, this was, I don't know what we thought the name should be, but I think it was the people who put it out who decided that I think directing the sitcom sitcom is the most direct way of explaining what this book is about.
Joe, let me ask you. You guys directed pilots.
Yes.
Okay. So out of, I'll just use some arbitrary numbers. Out of about 1,000 pitches, 100 scripts will be made. And out of 100 scripts, there might be 25 pilots made. And out of 25 pilots made, maybe 5 will get picked up. So why don't you tell me how you get paid as a pilot director for a show that's successful?
Okay. First of all, the pay is probably at least 4 to 5 times more than you'd make for the same weekly salary directing an episode of a sitcom. However, it might take 2 weeks as opposed to 1 week because you're involved in a pilot in casting. You're involved in perhaps some rewriting. You're much more involved with the process. And then essentially, if you sell a pilot to the network, you get, besides the standard residual pay that you would get if it keeps airing, you get I forget what the term is. Thank you very much. A license fee that every time an episode is shot. Now, Frank would know this more because he does budgets. Every time an episode is shot of a show that you did the pilot of, it could be 4 years later. I was getting these bonuses on Full House and Family Matters and Step by Step and Perfect Strangers for years.
You did the pilot of all of those?
Let me see. I did the pilot of Perfect Strangers. I did the pilot of Full House. I did the pilot of Family Matters. I did not do the pilot of Step by Step. I did not do the Step by Step.
So let me get this straight. Let me make sure that the audience is understanding this. So if you're making, I'm going to use low figures. I'm going to use, if you're making $25,000 a week to direct an episode of a show, to direct a pilot, you will make $125,000.
Yeah, between $100,000 and $125,000 because usually
for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks work.
Yeah, for 2 weeks work. I mean,
but then I'll let you adjust your light. If a show goes 200 episodes and your contract is for $2,500 per episode, you get paid $2,500 per episode for all of those 250 episodes, whether you directed those episodes or not. Just for having directed the pilot, you will get paid for those episodes.
Yep, you're absolutely right, Frank.
And into eternity.
Wow. So it's like your stamp is on it, that goes on, and you're on it. That's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
It's one of the great negotiating things that the DGA came up with, so that there was, if your work is the work that theoretically created a series, and if this series was good enough to go 8 seasons and do 200 episodes, if you were getting $3,000 an episode in terms of a royalty, that's what they called it, a royalty.
Right.
And basically, $3,000, they do 200 episodes. Well,
that's $600,000.
That's $600,000, but it's over a span of quite a number of years. You're not getting it in a big paycheck that they're sending you. But
for 2 weeks work. For 2 weeks work.
Not a bad union.
Not a bad deal. Not a bad deal.
And if you got them coming in from a lot of sources, it can be pretty.
How do I get in that union? That sounds pretty good to me.
You got as much chance of getting into that union as I do of getting into the firefighters union. Okay?
I think that's a better trade-off. I think I'd rather be in your union.
There you go. It could have been more financially lucrative for sure.
Frank and I, a few weeks ago, we had Billy Van Zandt on. And Billy
Billy
Van Zandt had written the book, Get in the Car, Jane. And
about Jane Whitmore?
Yes.
Was it about Jane?
Jane Millmore.
Millmore. Got so close. Okay.
And one of the things he wrote in the book, one of the chapters, was about Penny Marshall entering a room and taking command of the room, and nobody understood a word she said when she walked out of the room.
Well, that's why she kept me around. I understood what she said, and she liked the fact that I understood what she said, because basically she took me to school. She taught me what it was about. She would basically. They were not even. I couldn't get the ladies onto the set to rehearse because they were so politically involved in the fact that women were making 50% of the salary of men. And they were in trouble, so they weren't rehearsing in the mornings. They were battling with Paramount at that time for better pay. They were the #1 show in America and were making 50% of what Ron Howard and Henry Winkler were making on Happy
Laverne
Days.
and Shirley. Laverne and Shirley.
Laverne and Shirley. So basically, they would show up right after lunch at 1 o'clock, and we would put the show together, and we'd do a run through at 2:30. So eventually, Penny would come out saying, okay, this is it. I'm putting my bag here, my coat here. I'm going to the refrigerator. I'm getting a milk and Pepsi. I'm drinking. I'm crossing to my coat. I'm picking up my bag, and I'm going out the door. And she had this whole scene patterned by activity. And she would know that after a joke was said, she would cross to the next activity, do some spiel, and maybe a laugh would come, and she'd take the laugh and cross to the next activity. And then she had this whole thing planned out. So I basically learned pretty quickly that it was all about activity and once you had the location of the furniture so that they couldn't do strange things to you, basically it was finding the activity that they could play, and
to cover the laugh.
To cover the laugh, to get to cross, to do things out, to get the thing to be more visually interesting, And that was an amazing event to me. And to this day, I still think Cindy Williams may be one of the funniest women I've ever run into. The woman was totally insane. She would make choices and do things that was just astonishing. But Penny was a remarkable support, because every time you have buddy comedy, one person's got to be the Rock of Gibraltar, capable of just standing there and hanging on till the other person finished doing whatever insanity they were up to. Had it also on Perfect Strangers. Mark Lynn Baker was a rock. Bronson Pinchot, genius, was all over the place. And if it wasn't for Mark Lynn Baker kind of solidifying him and giving him something to play off of, I don't know that would have worked either. So it's always about the ability for people to get together.
And Mork and Mindy had Pam Dauber.
Go.
Go ahead, you go ahead.
Okay. The interesting about Pam Dauber was I think it was Howard Storm and I split Mork and Mindy's at the beginning. I was doing Laverne and Shirley and then Mork and Mindy, and Howard was doing Mork and Mindy and then Laverne and Shirley. And finally, Howard and I decided that he would take over Mork and Mindy and I would stay with Laverne and Shirley. But anyway, my first episode on Mork and Mindy, Pam Dauber came up to me. She said, I don't know what to do. I'm forever laughing at this guy. So I said, you know something? Make it part of your character. It's a character who loves to laugh at Mork because you find him funny. She bought that, and it made the rest of it work so easily for her. She thought she was in such trouble. She couldn't stop laughing, and for good reason. But nobody else could. This was quite a genius on stage, But
you talk about rocks. I understand one of your favorite duos and your favorite comedy skits of all time is Who's on First, which was written by Bud Abbott.
Oh, Who's on First? But that's I grew up a little bit with that kind of vaudeville Jewish shtick, and Who's on First may have been perhaps the best of them. But there was also people before that. I forget their name, but they did this routine of put on the coat is on, take off the coat, my boy, put on the coat, my boy. So essentially, but once you got into that was all my upbringing. My upbringing was watching Milton Berle, Sid Caesar, all the Jewish comics. Danny Kaye was a major. He was a Jewish film star. In Brooklyn, that was major. But at any rate, so I got into all these comedies, your Show of Shows, Carol Burnett, and that was how I built my sense of what I thought comedy was about.
Howard Morris was one of my best friends.
I love Howard.
I learned so much from Howard Morris, and we got some stories about Howard in the book.
Good.
He was truly a mensch. He was a great director. He was the fourth person on Show of Shows after Carl, Sid, and Imogene. But he was a brilliant talent, and I will be forever grateful to Howie Morris for helping me learn this trade, and I'm forever grateful to Howard Storm for my education, and to Joel Zwick as well.
Well, I've been put in very high company. Howard still remains a friend. God bless Howard Storm. He's got to be 84, 85 now. I don't know.
88.
Worst. And you see him walking around and you think he's a man 65,
Yep.
66 at
Yep.
worst. It's always great when I run into Howard.
Energy.
We had
Energy.
well, he was
Energy.
also he was great storyteller. Howard was a great storyteller of directors. He had stories to tell, but basically the luck that he got any rehearsal in at all was amazing because he was so busy telling his stories.
He's a tumbler.
A tumbler, very much a tumbler.
You know, Abbott and Costello, we have a chapter in there. Today's Rod Carew's birthday, by the way.
Yes.
Happy
Yes,
birthday,
happy birthday,
Rod.
Rod.
Well,
Happy birthday.
It was October 1st, but this is October 3rd.
Oh, I'm
but-
sorry, and there's also a chapter in there about the Hall of Fame, and Abbott and Costello are the only two guys that never played baseball that are in the
In the Hall of
Baseball
Fame.
Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Because
of who's on first.
Because of their routine. That's right.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's fascinating. It doesn't shock me, but it's certainly fascinating that they were smart enough to include it. It is one of the ultimate routines of all time.
No doubt about it. The 5 cents worth of licorice too.
You know, there's a picture, and I should have gotten it for this, but there's a Chinese guy by the name of Hu, H-U.
Oh no! I see it coming.
And he was in a college. He was in the Chicago Cubs game, and he was on first base. And
Unbelievable.
Who was on first?
The picture was who was finally on first. And I should have given Derek. I should have given Derek enough time to call that up, but I didn't really realize that I was going to get to that bit.
H-U apostrophe S is on first.
No, it's H-U who, but he was on first base.
Fantastic.
So that was
just
pretty
great.
good. So Joe, you've been a great guest. I want to give Billy a final parting shot here. Do you have any questions or anything you wanted to ask him? Because
I'm going to take the biggest thing I'm going to take away from this interview at 72 years old is I'm going to stay in the moment because a friend of mine told me, you know, Bill, not much longer now. Just hold on tight to all that's good.
Yeah,
And
there's
I think
no
I'm going to
there's
stay
no
in the
future. The future doesn't mean much to us. The present means much to us, and a chance to reflect a little bit on the past, because you can't reflect on the past until you don't have a future that you're contemplating. When you're not contemplating your future, you start to think, oh my God, and this happened and that happened, and these are the connectors. But one of the things that's also important is it's a business where people work with people they like, not just competent, like Frank said. If there are two people up for a job, if they like one, they're going to work with one and not the other. And that was that gives you a big, besides luck and timing and everything else, gives you a big head start. And that way, you know, you can make it happen for you. But staying in the moment right now, we got no choice. We only have the moment.
you got that right. Speaking of the moment, do you have anything else you want to promote? Your La Mama documentary?
I'm
Whatever.
working all kinds of things. It's not promotable yet because it's not far enough along to say it now and have it come out 6 years from now when I'm God knows how old, which I never remember, by the way, which was one of the beauties of getting older, is that you don't remember these things. But essentially, every once in a while, I just invert the numbers on my age and think totally that I'm 66 or 60. I'm not. It's not even close. But you know, it's what it is, and you know, grandkids now, and life that goes on with Zooming and hanging on with various things. By the way, this is a nice thing. I used to do this. Why don't more people do this particular connection?
Well, we did it to sell books.
Aha. Okay.
We've written 3 books. This is the first
Wow.
book. The second book will be out around the Super Bowl time, and the third book was yet to be published. But we've written 3 books, and we wanted to try to. It was Derek's idea, really. Derek's the genius behind this whole thing.
Good for Derek.
He thought that this would be entertaining, and it's, you know, it gives me something to do. Billy, you know, we talked about my background, we talked about your background. But Billy is a former drug addict. Billy was a former Vietnamese vet. Billy was a former bartender. Billy was a former drinker. Billy was a former alcoholic. Billy was a gambler, and he was a New York City fireman for 20 years.
My kind of guy.
at 58 years of age, he decided to give it all up and go back to school. He enrolled at the University of Florida. At 62 years old, he got a degree in journalism. And for the last 10 years, he's been writing and he's been working as a stand-up comic. So that's a guy who's been constantly. He hasn't had a drink since then. And look at that. He's made you speechless at that background.
That's truly remarkable to me. Truly remarkable that
coming from you, I'm going to take that as a huge compliment. I thought that Frank started this whole thing because he wanted me to be the darling of the nursing home.
Why don't you? The man's giving you a compliment, and you're stepping on all of his laughs. No. You're stepping on all of his words.
Runs in the family.
I appreciate it. I'm embarrassed to get compliment like that from a man of his stature.
Well, the fact that you survived all that and came out of it on top is what's so remarkable about it. I mean, you know, I gave up cigarettes. That's my total gain. You gave up 80,000 things. I gave up cigarettes, you know, and very proudly until this moment when I realized I'm a pauper. I am nothing. I've now been taken down a few notches.
And I just want to say also, Joel, that your backdrop, your setting is the perfect type of setting for what we're doing because you have depth, you have activity, you have everything, and you're right in the middle of the screen. So thank you for being such a great director and for being a part of a Mick, a Mook, and a Mike.
Indeed, and thank you for thinking of me, Frank, and getting me in on this podcast. I appreciate that big time.
I hope you've enjoyed yourself.
I have enjoyed myself. I have.
Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you so much.
We'll hook up for lunch soon after when we can come out of the cellars.
You got it. Looking forward to it. Take it easy, guys.
Thanks,
Joe.
Bye-bye.
So, that was
great. The guy's amazing. And I didn't mean to step on his line as much as I was embarrassed that a man of his stature should say those nice things to me.
Well, he's a good guy, and he's become quite a good friend. So with that, what do we want to talk about? The book is out. Did we talk about that in this? We talked about the book today.
We did. And when to expect it.
Okay, we talked about the book. So what we can talk about now is our picks. We're perfect.
Perfect.
Going into the fourth week of the season, we're perfect with one caveat. Somebody gave me the wrong game last week. So I picked a game in which nobody was playing.
They weren't playing each other, yeah.
So
it's like winning the Nobel Peace Prize for connecting two countries that weren't at war. So we'll give you a nod for picking the winner, but they didn't play the other team.
So we're perfect through 4
but
weeks.
I'm gonna have a caveat too. Now last week, again, I didn't see anything that jumped off me Saturday morning when we recorded. And anybody who knows me watches my picks. I usually pick 4 o'clock games and underdogs at 4 o'clock. But I usually pick a dog. I've always been a dog better. And I do it by the lines. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you 3 players on each team. I just look at the bookmakers' lines. I know they know what they're doing. And last week, after we did the podcast, that night I saw Arizona was playing Detroit. And Arizona was 2-0 and hot as hell. And Detroit was 0-2 and terrible. And they were playing at AZ. And the line opened up at 6. And I thought it should have been 8 or 9. And then it went down to 5.5. But it didn't happen till Saturday night. And we had already recorded it. So I said, geez, I love that game. And I called Derek and I said, can you do anything? And he said, nah, the podcast is up. That's it. So I did like Detroit. I know nobody's going to believe that I like Detroit over Arizona,
including me,
But I did tell you I like Detroit.
No, you didn't.
After I did, all right.
No, you didn't. Oh, you know what? I loved the Lakers last night.
Well, you were.
I loved the Lakers last night.
If Frankie Chicklets or Blinky or Crazy Steve is out there, call him and tell him. Anyway.
Oh, you know what else I love? I loved the Dodgers last night.
Yeah. Okay. Did they win? Did they win?
Yeah.
Because you could pick a loser after the game.
And you know who's...
you could pick a loser in a one-horse race.
And you know, I like the Yankees in their first...
All right. I get your point. We get your point.
Okay.
All right, here's
anybody can pick them after.
Oh, okay. Here's the deal.
Pick them before.
Here's the game I like this week. 1 o'clock. And when I tell you the game, you're probably going to drop dead. Everybody knows that Seattle's hot as hell right now. Everybody's talking about their quarterback, and rightfully so. The line opened up at 7 and dropped to 6.5. Seattle's playing Miami at home. I like Miami plus the 6.5 at home. I can't understand why that line dropped from 7 to 6.5, which is a big number. Russell Wilson's hot as hell. I like Miami plus 6.5 at 1 o'clock. Now, I promised last week that I would give you 2 games, and I have another game. And I'm having it in my mind, and I'm watching the line, and the line doesn't make sense to me. It's a 4 o'clock game Sunday. However, if that line changes come Sunday, and counterintuitively, the line is 7.
Counterintuitively?
Hang on. The line is 7. If it goes up to 7.5, which you would think I like the dog, I would be happy about, then I don't like the game. If it goes down to 6.5, I don't understand why the money's going in the wrong direction. And I have a game in mind, but I can't give it to you now because I have to check and see if that line moves. So, Saturday night or Sunday morning, Derek is going to put the pick up. That's provided my 1 o'clock game wins, which is Miami over Seattle. Go and check out the 4 o'clock game. It'll be up on our website, a Mick, a Mook, and a Mike. You might not like my pick, but while you're there, like the page. And
It'll be on Facebook.
It'll be on Facebook?
We're putting it on Facebook.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to put it on our webpage.
Yeah, a Mick, a Mook, and a Mike on Facebook.
On Facebook, okay.
Are you an Egypt?
Bit of an Egypt. I think in Ireland, a compounded Egypt. I'm a goose guy.
A goose guy.
So anyway, Miami plus 6.5, and we'll have the later game, the 4 o'clock game up on our website.
Derek will put it up anyway.
Beautiful.
So you have two chances to get a correct pick this week.
I'm going to have, they're both going to win.
Okay, fine. If you're talking about likes before I give my pick. We have to get likes. And the goal is to get 10,000 likes. So with October 1st being Rod Carew's birthday, when we get 3,053 likes, we're currently at about 1,100 now. When we get 3,053 likes, which is the number of career hits Rod Carew got, we will send an autographed baseball to a person who has liked. The only thing you have to do is you have to like the podcast, and a person that likes the podcast will be picked at random from a name from those 350 people and receive
3,000 people.
3,050 people and receive this Rod Carew baseball. So autographed by Rod Carew. So give you an incentive to.
That's wonderful. Yeah, you give them an incentive to like it, and the same
like
amount of hits the Rod has. That's terrific.
And it won't cost you a thing. So
it won't cost you anything.
Just like the show.
And it's been remarkable the support. I mean, we've had 6,000, 8,000, 7,000 views, but the idea is to like the podcast itself on the Mick and Mook and a Like page.
Okay. So now I'm going to make a pick. So,
let's hear it.
So I'm as perfect as you are, and I don't even know what game Derek's going to pick. So Derek, give me the game, give me the spread, and tell me who's home.
Okay, the game is Indianapolis and Chicago.
Right.
Playing at Chicago, Indianapolis at -2.5.
So what's that mean, -2.5?
Indianapolis is laying 2.5 points. You have to win if you like Indianapolis by more than 2.5. If you like the Bears, you're starting off with 2.5 points.
Okay, I'm going to pick the Bears.
Picking the Bears at home plus 2.5.
Bears at home plus 2.5. I believe I'm a casual football fan, and I'm a big believer in Nick Foles. And Nick Foles took the Philadelphia Eagles to a Super Bowl 1 year. I'm a big believer in Nick Foles. Chicago plus 2.5. Great.
All right.
That's three in a row for me.
Now bear in mind that both of us are going to go into the toilet sooner or later. Nobody wins betting football, so I'm not saying go out and take your mortgage and dump it on Miami plus 6.5. But that's who I like Sunday. I will have the later game up on Facebook. And again, we're going to go south. Right now we're hot. We're riding the fade, but we will go south. That's the way it works.
And remember, before we sign off, These Lips Could Talk is in.
Yes.
So within 2 weeks, you should be receiving it. Within 1 week, if you bought the book on Acclaim Press, they're just processing the book at Amazon. I don't know how long it takes to get it into their system, but they're out, and hopefully you guys can read it soon. If you haven't bought it, buy it now. And if we have some shout outs because we have some people that have been writing in and watching the show consistently. So, Billy, who do you want to shout out to?
Well, I want to shout out to Philip Waring. Philip Waring, #1. He's got a book out, too, about weddings, and he's always watching. And Mike Carey, a comic in New York. Frank, you got a few people you want to shout out?
Well, I know
to?
Grant Rosenberg's a really good watcher, and Grant's I can't read that. Grant's I know what Grant's a really good author. But Billy keeps handing me notes when I'm trying to read notes. I'm trying to listen to Derek in my headphones. I don't do this for a living, pal. I don't
You
do
do
this
now, pal.
So Grant Rosenberg is a fine writer and was the executive at Paramount. He's got a book coming out. Also, next week's guest will be Tony Opadesano, known as Tony O. Tony was Frank Sinatra's confidant.
Wow.
He spent the last 15, 20 years of Frank's life with him. I'm very happy to have Tony as our guest next week. He's a terrific guy.
So Tony O. So we're going to talk about Sinatra next week.
Next week we'll talk about Sinatra. We'll talk about Rickles because he was also Rickles' road manager, and Sinatra was playing with Rickles. Tony O was the lead guy that I coordinated Sinatra's appearance on Daddy Dearest with the Don Rickles show with in 1992 or so. So we have a lot to talk about next week.
Well, our guests, thanks to you, have been diverse as hell. I mean, we've been going from Artist Gilmore to Billy Van Zandt to Joel Zwick today, just terrific guests.
To the heroes of 9/11.
And Chris Cope, comedy, and Tony O now. Next week, we're going to talk about Sinatra.
We got upcoming weeks. We got Mary McNamara, Pulitzer Prize winner from the LA Times. We've got the Pump Brothers for the beginning of the college basketball season. We've got Armin Katayan who's going to be on. And we've got the military veterans, including Derek's,
for Veterans Day.
Derek's father, who was an intelligence officer during Vietnam, and a couple of really good friends of mine who were both retired Marines. So we have good shows.
Just
good
diverse.
Shows coming up.
Good diversity.
Yep.
And thanks for that, Frank, and thanks for giving me a chance to meet Joel Zwick. I enjoyed it.
So with that, we will sign off. Thanks,
you
everybody.
Very much for looking in. Appreciate it.
We'll see you next week.